Welcome to NBA Today, presented by Xfinity Mobile. We start with a developing story. The NBA announced this morning it has suspended Memphis Grizzlies star Ja Morant for 25 games due to conduct detrimental to the league. Now, Morant was already suspended from team activities on May 14th after a video on social media circulated showing the All-Star brandishing a firearm. Now, the NBA, they previously suspended Morant for 8 games following a similar incident in March when he was seen on Instagram Live holding up a handgun while intoxicated at a Denver area nightclub. And you can see here in a statement released by the NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, he said, Ja Morant's decision to once again wield a firearm on social media, it is alarming, disconcerting, and given his similar conduct in the past, the potential for other young people to emulate Ja's conduct is particularly concerning. And he continued, quote, under these circumstances, we believe a suspension of 25 games it is appropriate, and it makes clear that engaging in reckless and irresponsible behavior with guns, it will not be tolerated. For Ja, basketball, it needs to take a back seat at this time. And prior to his return to play, he will be required to formulate and fulfill a program with the league that directly addresses the circumstances that led him to repeat this destructive behavior. So with that as the background, we now welcome in senior NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski. Woj, let's start here. How did the NBA land on 25 games as the appropriate suspension length for Ja Morant?
Well, Malika, essentially, about 3 times more than the initial 8-game suspension, but more so in line with other suspensions of behavior in different manners that the league certainly cannot tolerate. You look back last season, Miles Bridges, 30 games for a domestic abuse charge in Charlotte, 25 games in this situation, Malika. And with the new collective bargaining agreement, you have to play a minimum of 65 games to be eligible for All-NBA, MVP, Sixth Man of the Year, any of those awards. And for Ja Morant, who would be eligible for the Supermax, he obviously cannot reach that minimum of 65 games with this suspension. So it'll cost him $7.6 million in salary for those 25 games, a little over $300,000 a game.
Yeah, for that 25-game suspension. Now, Silver also referenced certain requirements that Ja's going to need to fulfill before he's actually able to return to the floor. So what specifically is the league expecting from him here?
And there really are no specifics, and there's essentially a vagueness to what the league has laid out, and that was a big part of the reason that the Players Association today, in issuing a statement and expressing their unhappiness, not just with the length of Ja Morant's suspension, based on other similar and perhaps not so similar transgressions by players through the years and what those suspensions were, I think including some domestic violence suspensions that were less than Ja Morant, 25 games. But I think for the Players Association, I think getting a sense of clarity on what that means. Listen, I think what the league is saying and what they described is they want to see with Ja Morant that the pattern of behavior, habits that he's displayed, not just in these 2 incidences with the guns, the first in Denver in March, and then the most recent in the video in the car, but he's been investigated by the league for well over a year and a half, 12 months, in a number of instances where Ja Morant seemingly put himself and others in harm's way. And I think there's just been a pattern of behavior with Ja Morant that has been alarming, disappointing, and I think the league, what they want to see as Ja Morant is away from the team, first of all, that's this summer, but then into next season when he's not able to play, that he's taking steps to address that. They can tangibly see it. Now, he will be allowed to be around the team's facility in Memphis. That's going to be open to him. That is open to him. So he can come in, he can work out, he can stay certainly in physical shape, but also be around his teammates, his coaches, any other support staff that might be helpful to him. And I think that's going to be an important part of this, is Ja Morant, I think, tries to change, again, behavior habits that may have contributed to him being suspended now for a second time, this time for 25 games to start the season.
Yeah, you mentioned the Players Association statement. Excessive and inappropriate is the words that they used in that statement. Now, as our Bobby Marks has reported, Ja Morant does have a 30-day window here to file a grievance, but it would have to be Morant that does so. It's not the Players Association that is allowed. 25 games was the suspension. What was your initial reaction here?
I thought accurate. I think even in his message, now again, you know, you want to see him walk the walk, not necessarily talk the talk, but I think he addressed everything. I think he addressed the brands. I think he addressed the sponsorships. I think he addressed the kids that look up to him. When all of this was going down, you heard so many analysts. Mike Wilbon, the Hall of Famer, was like, I won't let my kids wear his shoes. And these are the things that, like, you have to understand. When people are betting on you, when people are investing in you, that's where the responsibility comes. And I think he understands that he fell short of that responsibility, and I think he's going to do everything he can to work back towards that.
I think that's fair. I think Adam Silver was beyond fair with 25 games. I was expecting 25 to 30 games, but I'm very disappointed. In a time after we just got through watching and covering the NBA Finals, when we're supposed to be moving on to the draft, talking about Victor Wembanyama and Scoot Henderson and Brandon Miller, here we are over the last couple of days, we've been talking about Zion Williamson and Ja Morant. And it's very disappointing because we're looking at two box office superstars that has, you know, risen to the point where every kid around the country wants to be them. And when I look at Ja and I look at how his shoes sold out within 48 hours, and you walk in AAU arenas, in AAU gyms, and all the kids got his shoes on, like he's done a disservice to them. I know he haven't committed an actual crime, but it's hurting the next generation. And I've talked about this time and time again, how Larry and Magic, how they passed the torch to Jordan and Hakeem Olajuwon, and those guys passed the torch to Kobe Bryant and Shaq and Kevin Garnett and Tim Duncan. Here it is today, guys are making $40 to $50-something million a year, right? It's these guys' job and obligation to make sure they pass the torch and do it the right way, because I'm gonna tell you right now, the way that the league is trending, international players is the players that you should trust. If you want a franchise guy to build around, I'm trusting the international players that are coming in. You look at Jokic, we never hear anything about him outside of basketball. Think about Giannis, nothing negative outside of basketball. Joel Embiid, nothing negative outside of basketball. Luka Doncic, nothing negative outside of basketball. And so when I think about what's going on right now, and everybody could give a perspective about Josh should have got more, or what he's going to do, how he's going to come back, I'm disappointed on how he's represented for the culture and how he's not fulfilling what other guys have laid the foundation to put him in position where he's at right now.
Woj noted the $7.6 million he will lose in salary for this 25-game suspension. That's in addition to the $700,000 he lost for the 8-game suspension last season. Zach, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, Perk brought up a whole lot of geopolitical issues. I'm just going to narrow in on this specific case. This was about what I expected in terms of the number of games. And the Players Union statement about it being excessive and inappropriate, I think I have two follow-up questions, and I've already put these to the NBA and I haven't heard back yet. The first is, Adam Silver alluded to during his statement in the finals that they had uncovered additional information. What is it? Is it implied in the statement? Is it in the statement? I'd like to know that. And number two, what makes this case distinct from previous gun-related suspensions, other than Gilbert Arenas, and that's guns in the facility? That's a totally different thing. And I don't mean to minimize this conduct. This is serious conduct. Playing with guns is not playing, period. It's super dangerous. But if you look back, even under David Stern, Steven Jackson got 7 games for firing a gun outside a strip club. Raymond Felton got 4 games for holding an unlicensed firearm in a confrontation with, I believe, his ex-wife. Why is it 25 games here? And there are probably reasonable answers to that. It could be those cases were adjudicated in the court of law. Both Raymond Felton and Steven Jackson pleaded guilty. It could be the era of video. These things are caught on video, and that changes the whole game. It could be, as Woj mentioned, the totality of circumstances around Ja Morant. This is not one incident. It's not even just the 2 gun-related incidents. There's a whole lot of other incidents we've talked about. It could be all of that. I just think the NBA kind of should maybe proffer an explanation why this is so distinct, why 25 games. I think ultimately it's fair, but the union is also fair to say, hey, wait a second, this is a big number. It's a big, big number for, as Perk said, what is not a crime. And I'm not saying the number is wrong. I'm just saying there are gaps of information here that I think the NBA owes it to the fans, to Ja Morant, to the Grizzlies, to the players union to kind of explain a little bit more. That's all.
Perk?
No, but Zach, you got to understand, like, he just came off an 8-game suspension, and obviously he had conversations with Adam Silver, and then with less than 2 months, he's back at it again. I think that's what caused the 25-game suspension. Like, this is his second.
Could be. I said the totality of
go-around.
circumstances. Could be that's what it was.
You have to imagine that some clarity,
yeah.
Perk and Zach, is going to come in the coming weeks and the coming months, especially as to what it is that Ja Morant is going to need to do outside of the 25 games in order to make sure that he gets that good standing with the league and returns to the court with all of the appropriate action that he has done. We have a lot.